I have the great honor and distinction of being able to introduce our keynote speaker, Andrew Hoffman. Andrew is the Holcim Professor of Sustainable Enterprise at the University of Michigan, a position that holds joint appointments with the Stephen M. Ross School of Business and the recently renamed School of Environment and Sustainability, which previously was the School of Natural Resources at the University of Michigan. He serves as the Education Director of the Graham Sustainability Institute. Andrew's research uses a sociological perspective to understand the cultural and institutional aspects of environmental issues for organizations in particular. He focuses on the processes by which environmental issues both emerge and evolve as social, political, and managerial issues. He's published over 100 articles and book chapters, as well as 14 books, which have been translated into 5 languages. His most recent books include How Culture Shapes the Climate Change Debate, Academic Engagement in Public and Political Discourse, and Finding Purpose, Environmental Stewardship as a Personal Calling. There's a number of awards in here that are almost too numerous to mention, so I won't in the interest of time. But he has served on research committees for the National Academies of Sciences, the Johnson Foundation, the Climate Group, the China Council for International Cooperation on Environment and Development, and the Environmental Defense Fund. And I think equally interesting, prior to his academic life, Andrew worked for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, Metcalf and Eddy Consultants, T&T Construction, and the Amoco Corporation. So he's got a good non-academic background as well. So with that, I'm going to stop and introduce Andrew Hoffman as our keynote speaker.
Okay, well, thank you, David. Thank you, Sherry, for the invitation. Thanks, Books and Mortar. There's a very lonely book salesperson back there that would really like to meet you and separate you from your money and let you leave with a book. So I want to encourage you to stop back there. In the introduction, as it was said, I have a joint appointment in the business school and the School of Environment and Sustainability. And so I live a very schizophrenic life, one that you may relate to. When I go into the business school, people see me as a tree hugger. And then when I go in the School of Environment, people see me as a capitalist sellout. Somewhere in the middle is the reality, but the important thing is bringing the two together. That's what you folks do here. And there's tremendous power in being able to bring two sets of values, two constituencies together and find a middle ground. Find a way forward, find opportunities where other people only see problems. And so I've been doing this for a number of years, long enough that 2 years ago I was introduced as a keynote at an academic conference, and I was introduced as a grandfather of the field. Now, I didn't like that description. Either that means I'm really well preserved, or this is a very young field. And it is a very young field. I did get into it in the early 1990s, coincidentally when the U.S. Green Building Council started in 1993. And so I've seen this field develop over time. Some of you have probably lived it with me. And I have some thoughts on where it may be going. So what I want to do tonight is just give you a sense of where I have seen it go and where I see it going next, to try and provoke you into thinking about what you do in your daily life or your work or what you're doing here with the Western Michigan Usgbc, and think about what the next steps are. When I look over the past 25, 30 years, we really start talking about corporations attending to environmental issues, attending to sustainability because they wanted to, not because regulations were pushing them. That really begins around 1990. And since 1990, we've had an increased attention in public awareness on the issue, and this is just a graph of news coverage of the topic of sustainable development, and you can see a nice steady upward trend. If you look at research on business and sustainability, again, In the early 1990s, just starts to shoot up, all continuously upward trends. You can take a look at activity in corporations, and whether it's chief sustainability officers, dedicated sustainability departments, doing reports on sustainability, whether it's GRI or any of the others, all steady upward trends. And I want to highlight this, the third bullet on this one, that business is recognizing that education is sorely needed in this intersection between business and sustainability. And so business schools are responding. When I first started as a professor in 1995, no one was really doing this. In fact, when I was trying to get a committee together at the business school at MIT where I went to school, business school professors said, "What are you doing over here? This has no business," no pun intended, "has no business in a business school. You should be over in public policy. You should be over in nonprofit management. Why are you in a business school?" And now sustainability is really table stakes in management education. You can see, again, graphs of the number of programs on sustainability in business schools growing quite rapidly over time. This is exciting. Now, what are they focusing on when they talk about these issues in a business school? Well, for the most part, and I'm going to call this Business Sustainability 1.0, and I'm going to call it enterprise integration, and I'll explain that in a minute. But what we do is we teach sustainability as a market shift. So it could be a market shift like any one of these. And so I'll show this to my students, and I'll say, have you ever seen that device in the bottom left-hand corner? And you'd be surprised how many have not seen a typewriter. Well, I point out that's a typewriter. And then how many of you seen the device in the bottom right? Well, that's a computer. And they live by computers. They all know computers. They all know that. I say, okay, now, let me drive my point. How many people have heard of Smith Corona, Brother, or IBM? And they all perk up. I know IBM. They don't know the other two. Those were the three primary typewriter manufacturers in the world when I was going to school. And I see a lot of nodding heads. And then a market shift started. One of them saw the market shift, two of them did not. One of them still here, two of them are gone. IBM is still here. If you lived through it, you remember all the weird gyrations, all the weird hybrid forms of this typewriter / word processor, really not understanding where this was going. If you do remember back to that day, you remember Stephen Jobs pronouncing, "I see a day where there'll be a computer in every home." And most of us, me included, what is this guy smoking? Who would want a computer in their home? Because all I knew were big mainframes. All I knew were punch cards and working on computers like that. Now imagine a home without a computer. That's a market shift. And it can put companies out of business, and it can elevate others into other areas. Sustainability can do this. Sustainability can also change our culture. So on the left, we have a device that I think, as I look at the audience, you all know. That's a Sony Walkman. My students have never seen one of these, much less seen a cassette tape. Over there, we have the iPod. Now, this is not just a technological and a market shift, it's a culture shift. It's a change in how we think. It's a change in how we access information. It's a change in how we communicate. It's extremely intuitive. Stephen Jobs' Apple computer, it's either a sign of their genius or their evil. But walk into any Apple store. You'll find a table about this tall. You'll find 5-year-olds walk up and start searching on the computer. It's intuitive. That device on the left is not. NPR actually did a story 2 years ago. They took a 13-year-old, they took away his iPod, they gave him a Walkman. After a week, they asked him, how was it? And he said it wasn't until halfway through the week where he realized you had to take the cassette tape out, turn it over, put it back in to hear the other side of the tape. It didn't make sense to him. But hand anyone an iPod, and they know what to do with it. And it changes how we think. It changes what we do in universities. Teaching facts is no longer something that we can really focus on because any student can pull up, and I put in big quotes, a fact on their iPod. We need to start to teach people how to be discerning consumers of information in the cyberspace out there. And that changes what we do as universities and how we get our information out there because what our president has certainly shown us, among other things, is that social media matters. What he can do on Twitter is really turn the world on a dime. And I still have a lot of colleagues who think social media is a waste of time, Twitter is a waste of time, and I'm flummoxed by this. Look at what's going on in this country and look at how social media is driving discourse, access to facts, reliability of facts, availability of information. That is a change in our culture. And again, sustainability is a change in our culture. So, when I put it in these terms, when I frame sustainability as a market shift, then what I do is I walk into the classroom and I say, you know what? I'm not going to teach you corporate social responsibility. I'm not going to talk about radiative forcing or carbon loading. I'm going to talk about business. I'm going to talk about straight line business. I'm going to talk about market shifts. If I don't do that, then what I'm telling my students is go to your other classes, learn how to maximize NPV, ROI, ROA. Come into my class, I'm going to teach you a different value set. That is not sustainable. We have to find ways, work on ways to make business and sustainability synergistic and strong and sustainable. And that's what I do here. So when you frame it as a market shift, it starts to change the discourse. For example, the question, does it pay to be green? Let's throw that question out, because in a market shift, that question is nonsensical. In a market shift, you innovate. Does it pay to innovate? No. It depends on who does it, when they do it, and how they do it. It's hard. And if you simply answer a blanket question, does it pay to be green, you're ignoring the deep complexity and the challenges of doing this. So if we frame it as a market shift, there are really three questions we can ask to start to dive deeper into how to think about sustainability as a business concern. First, who is driving it externally? Connect it to somebody that matters in the business community, somebody that the company already listens to. So it could be government, it could be insurance companies, it could be suppliers and buyers. These are all constituents that companies listen to. You see, I don't have the environment up there, because I'm not here to talk about it's the right thing to do, it's a moral thing to do. You put it in business language, business will pay attention. You frame it this way. Second question, who's going to handle it inside the company? Where does it land? Where does the Chief Sustainability Officer sit? Where does the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety sit? That will tell you a lot about how the company thinks about and handles environmental and sustainability issues. Does it sit in community affairs? Does it sit in operations? Totally different approach. Does it sit within the strategic core of the company? Now you're hitting the sweet spot. Now you got something going. Because at the end of the day, to frame sustainability as a market shift, you put it in this language. This is what I talk about in the classroom. I talk about operational efficiency, cost of capital, consumer demand. You put it in this language, and you've got people's attention in business. I gave a talk a number of years ago to a business group on climate change and how it's going to change their business environment. And they weren't excited to hear it. I find some trade association directors invite me in to sort of give their members religion on sustainability. And before the talk began, there was a table in front, and a gentleman came in before the talk, and he slammed a book on the table very loudly, very deliberately, for effect, for me. And the title of the book was called The Climate Hoax. So I kind of knew where he was going to go with his questions in my talk, and in the middle of the talk, he interrupted. And he said, this is all nonsense because climate change is a hoax. My answer was, I don't care. You can be agnostic about the science of climate change and still see it as a business issue because regulation is going to change your market, consumers want to buy your product, insurance companies are going to raise your premiums or limit coverage, suppliers and buyers are going to press you to do it. Adapt if you wish, I don't care. What could he say? I put it in the language of business, I had his attention. That's what we're doing on enterprise integration, sustainability 1.0. And so we have numerous market shifts in play that I can talk about purely as a business issue. On the upper left, we have an incandescent light bulb. Should you be investing in incandescent light bulb companies? The answer is no, and I think you all know this if you're in the building industry. Should you be investing in CFLs? Probably not. Should you be investing in LEDs? Yes. Now this is the typewriter story, because the technology to make an LED is different than a technology to make an incandescent or a CFL. Those are older technologies. You run electricity through a filament or a gas and it creates light. But LEDs, it's solid state technology. It's a different sector, it's a different set of capabilities, it's a different industry. And it's interesting to watch what's happening in the lighting industry as what we're facing now is socket saturation. As more and more people put in LEDs, demand will start to drop off. You have two options in the lighting industry right now, and companies are pursuing both. One, you get out and you sell your assets, and some companies doing that. The other is you differentiate. So Philips right now, for example, is selling light bulbs that you can pull out your cell phone and you can turn your house blue or red or green or whatever you want to do. Or maybe you can put speakers in the sockets that run wirelessly so you can put music through your house. They try and find ways to move beyond the standard notion of a light bulb. There's a market shift. It's driven in part, not entirely, but in part by sustainability. There are others up here as well. You have a standard dumb thermostat on the left. On the right, you have a Nest thermostat. I'm sure this audience knows these quite well. How many people have a Nest thermostat? How many people have seen a Nest thermostat? How many people have not seen a Nest thermostat? Okay. This is a technology. It's designed by Apple engineers. It's very intuitive. It's very beautiful. It's very slick. It's a programmable computer, nothing new, or thermostat, nothing new there. But it also does a number of other things. It has a motion sensor in it, so it knows I'm not home right now, and it has dialed the house down to 50 degrees, a temperature I set, so it's not wasting energy. I can actually, as I get close to Ann Arbor, pull out my cell phone, raise the temperature back up. My fiance laughs at me because in the morning when I wake up, rather than walking downstairs and changing the thermostat, I take out my cell phone and change the heat in the house from the bedroom upstairs. But that's what you can do with it, and it learns your behavior. If you set a program, but start to change it on a regular basis, it will change the program for you. It will start to learn your behavior. Siemens has one that will track the GPS on your phone, and if you're going in the direction of your house, if you hit a certain radius, it knows you're coming home and it automatically turns the heat up for you. This is the beginning of the smart home. And again, I'm just preaching to the converted here. This is where we're going. And then to the left of it, the GE Eco Dashboard. How many people have seen one of these? A little harder to get. I tried to get my hands on one, and they only sell them to contractors, and you have to put it at the beginning of the house. But this gives you a real-time display of your energy and water use. So your son or daughter might come home from college, wake up on Saturday morning, take that 3-hour shower that they like to take, and you will have a $1 readout on how much that shower cost. So when they come downstairs, you can say, that shower just cost $5, don't do it again. And you'll be able to connect behavior to outcomes, and rather the energy bill coming at the end of the month, and it's like death and taxes, you pay it, but you don't know where it got, how it got there. Now you can start to learn energy use in your home. It will change our culture. You will go on vacation. You'll turn everything off, and you'll see the house is still drawing power, and people will start to learn about phantom loads. And that 50-inch plasma TV that they love so much is using more power turned off than a regular TV turns on, so you can keep the plasma warm for the instant on. They'll learn that that cable box, you've turned it off, you haven't turned off anything. You've turned off the LED display, the guts are still going, so the cable company can monitor the device. And then they'll start to think differently about products that they buy, and they'll start to think differently about energy. For example, right now in my house is a hot water heater, making hot water for someone who's not home. This makes no sense. And people start to think about instant hot water heaters and start to think differently about energy use in their home, and then off we go. I don't want to go through all these, but this is the idea of a market shift and culture change in play. Another example up in the upper left is a standard front-loading washing machine, introduced into this country only in the last 15 years or so. A tough sell. People were hesitant to buy them because they saw it uses less water, less energy, must not clean so well, and people actually stopped buying them when they saw the Energy Star label. And companies like Whirlpool and Maytag, now part of Whirlpool, had to work with Consumer Reports to educate consumers, work with retailers on how to sell them, work with detergent makers to make better detergents to make them work. Tough sell. On the right there, that guy with a lab coat, that's a company in the UK that is developing a washing machine that uses no water whatsoever. It cleans with nylon beads. There's going to be an interesting consumer introduction project, but changing our culture. Can you clean without water? I can go through any number of these. I want to just point out one last one. On the bottom left, you can have your standard coal-fired power plant. You can have wind power or solar power. We all get excited about that. Or you can start to think differently about where we get energy. And there's a quote I love to use by Edwin Land. He says, the first step in having a new idea is stop having an old idea. And that's where young people come in because they aren't encumbered with the old ideas that our generation is stuck with. But here is a schematic of a train station in Tokyo that's creating energy from a source that's overlooked every day. That's the footsteps of the thousands of people that pass through the train station because the floor has sensors in it that pick up that impact and turn it into electricity. It's expensive electricity, but they're getting electricity from a site that we overlook. And one of my students actually told me that there's a dance club in Stockholm that has this technology on the dance floor, and that runs the lighting. So if you dance slow, the lights start to dim. If you dance fast, they start to light up. That's connecting behavior to outcomes, and that's culture change. So this is exciting. This is the way I've been teaching sustainable business, the way we've been thinking about sustainable business. Put it in business terms, we can make movement, we can make action, we can get the thing done. And so now we are presumably living in a sustainable society. You can eat sustainable food, you can stay in a sustainable hotel, you can drive a sustainable car, you can wear sustainable clothes. We are getting sustainable, or are we? Because there's a big but to all this, and that's where I want to transition to where I think we're going. Because the problem is that the problems are getting worse and they're taking on a different form. How many people have heard the term the Anthropocene? Okay. Just a few. If I do nothing tonight, I want to introduce you to a new term, because this is a shift in how we need to think about environmental issues, how we need to think differently about business sustainability, how we need to think differently about buildings and about cities and about infrastructure. Now, scientists have proposed that we have left the Holocene and we've entered the Anthropocene, the age of humans. You cannot describe the environment anymore without including the role of humans. We are changing the ecosystems of the Earth. We are in charge of these ecosystems on Earth. There are trends that are quite disturbing and quite troubling that have accelerated drastically since 1950. Here's CO2 emissions, and we all know this graph, the famous hockey stick graph. Michael Mann developed this. Looking at CO2, and you can see the dotted line is 1950. Scientists call this the Great Acceleration from 1950 on. They describe the Anthropocene, by the way, as beginning in the late 1800s with the invention of the steam engine by James Watt. And that started to bring about the Industrial Revolution, and off we go. And so, but the Great Acceleration from 1950 on, upward trend in CO2, upward trend in a whole host of variables, nitrous oxide, methane, ocean acidification, domesticated land, tropical forest loss, marine fish capture, all spiking since 1950. Those correspond with socioeconomic trends, growth in population, critically important to the conversation here. Real GDP, foreign direct investment, urban population, large dams, transportation, everything increasing after 1950. I even saw someone create a graph like this on the number of McDonald's. Steep upward slope. We are now taking charge of ecosystems on Earth such that we are reaching some critical thresholds that we should not cross. Scientists call this planetary boundaries. They define 9 of them. These are boundaries for a safe operating system on the planet, boundaries beyond which we should not go, 3 of which we have already crossed. So, the climate crisis on the top, climate change. We are altering the global climate. We are doing this. Humans are doing this. Nitrogen. Humans create more fixed nitrogen than natural processes. It goes into farmland, it goes into manufacturing, it ends up in rivers, it creates algae blooms. The mouth of the Mississippi River is a dead zone. We are doing this. Phosphorus is right behind it. Biodiversity loss. We are causing massive extinctions. There are estimates that 50% of the species today will be gone by 2100. We are doing this. And then there are others right behind it. Ocean acidification. The ocean's becoming more acidic. It's basic chemistry. If you increase the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere or in the air above a liquid, it enters the liquid, turns it acidic. And it's destroying the base of the food chain. Ozone depletion is in retreat. That's the only one in retreat. Fresh water use. Cape Town almost ran out of water this past summer. And that's a fascinating mental exercise. A city can run out of energy, it can run out of, the sewers can back up, you can still make it through. You run out of water, you really have to leave. And Cape Town isn't the first one to face this. And again, we are doing this. Sao Paulo was another that almost ran out of water. Fresh water use, fresh water availability coming to some dangerous proportions because we're drawing down water tables that took millions of years to form. And then we also have social boundaries that are being crossed around income inequality, human rights, and others. So what are we in? What is the Anthropocene? That's all data. And I'm involved in a project with the National Academies of Sciences right now to how to communicate science to the public, particularly around climate change. And one thing that's central to the effort we're doing is recognizing that people aren't moved by data. You will not protect the environment if I give you more data. You will protect it if I tell you stories. You will protect it if it's something you care about, if it resonates with you personally, if it touches you personally. So let me give you a sense of what the Anthropocene is on a personal level. I was talking to a research chemist from Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. In the middle of the conversation, in very matter-of-fact language, he said, "You know there are measurable levels of ibuprofen in the Mediterranean Sea." My jaw hit the floor, both at the statement, but also the casualness with which he said it. He went on to say, "That does not concern us. Ibuprofen is a relatively benign compound. What does concern us are birth control pills and antidepressants. You take a drug, sometimes your body doesn't even use it. Its mere presence does the job. If it does use it, it uses a very small percentage. It passes through. It enters the treatment plant. The treatment plant is not designed to handle these complex chemicals. It enters the aquatic ecosystem, and it's changing the flora and the fauna." There are numerous studies right now of very weird birth defects at the outfalls of discharges from sewage treatment plants. But to actually put it on a personal level, 2 years ago, scientists in Seattle were studying the salmon in Puget Sound, and what did they find? They found Prozac. They found 40 prescription drugs. They even found cocaine. And this is the salmon that's showing up on your plate at that restaurant you love so well. That's the Anthropocene. We are changing the environment, we're taking responsibility for systems, and we don't know what we're doing. Stephen Jay Gould captured it quite nicely. We have become, by the power of a glorious evolutionary accident called intelligence, the stewards of life's continuity on Earth. We did not ask for this role, but we cannot abjure it. We may not be suited to it, but here we are. This is our problem. This is the next generation's problem. We cannot dodge it. We have to solve it. What do we do about it? What do people in this room do about it? What does the next generation do about it? This is, in Thomas Berry's words, the great work, the great challenge before us. It is delivered to us without any consultation with ourselves, but we have to respond. So what is the response? Some people are saying, well, capitalism is the problem. Let's destroy capitalism. So Naomi Klein has a book and a talk that we have to shred capitalism and come up with something new. And now we have a debate. David Brooks saying, no, capitalism is good. And Paul Mason saying, no, capitalism bad, it's over. And I find this a very tired and unproductive conversation, an unproductive debate. As much as it may be a surprise to my students and maybe even to some of you, capitalism is not a natural system. It is a system created by human beings in the service of human beings, and it can adapt to the interests of human beings. Capitalism, in fact, is quite malleable, and it changes often. You can't price fix, you can't collude, you can't have monopoly power. These are rules of the market. We accept them. They have been set over time. There's no reason to believe that the market, capitalism, cannot evolve to deal with the issues we are coming upon now. How will it evolve is a much better question, and what will it evolve into? Because also, capitalism is not monolithic. Scandinavian capitalism is very different than American capitalism, very different than Japanese capitalism on the role of government, the interactions with business, the amount of autonomy and freedom business can have to do certain things. There are many possible futures, and we want to figure out what that future is going to be. So, a great quote from William Gibson, "The future is already here, it's just not very evenly distributed." We can have a glimpse of where this is going. We can have a glimpse of the next stage of business sustainability, and that's where I want to go with you now. There are numerous markers out there, and these are just some of them, and I could just fill this whole chart, this whole slide with all kinds of markers of different things happening right now that are quite unusual. Did anyone see what WeWork did last month? This is how really out of the box this stuff can go. So WeWork has announced they're going to go carbon neutral by 2020. They also recognize that one of the number one elements, one of the top elements in our carbon footprint is meat eating. So what have they done? If you go on a business trip for WeWork and that expense report you file has meat in it, they will not pay it. They are going to force everyone in their company, if you're doing work for us, you're going vegetarian, and that's going to reduce our carbon footprint. It's that kind of out-of-the-box thinking that's going to get us there. What does it look like? That's what I want to talk about. I want to give you two ways of thinking about sustainable business. The first is what I've been talking about already, what I call enterprise integration. And that's all about putting sustainability in the language of business as it exists right now. Don't challenge the system, make it fit within the system. And it works to a certain point. It has limitations. Something is lost when you just say the only reason to care about the environment is because of the money we can make by protecting it. Because that can lead to some really strange questions, such as, give me the business case for reducing carbon emissions. Give me the business case for addressing climate change. To my mind, that's exactly the same thing as saying, give me the business case not to commit suicide. Economic logic will not get us all the way. We need something else to get us further. So in the first half, it's about reducing unsustainability, doing less bad. The second form is called market transformation. How do we change the system, develop new tools to help companies transform markets by re-examining capitalism, consumption, and the role of the corporation in society? This is in play. This is in flux right now. So where in the past we focused on reducing unsustainability, the second is on creating sustainability. Doing less bad, doing good. They're fundamentally different approaches. They're fundamentally different ways of thinking. Look at it this way. In Iraq, we stopped the war. That is a totally different process than creating peace. Totally different way of thinking, totally different approach, totally different set of tactics. And that's the shift that's required as we move into market transformation. So in enterprise integration, we focus on business strategy, and we focus on reducing carbon emissions. In market transformation, we focus on systems change, and we focus on going carbon zero, carbon neutral, or even going carbon negative. And we don't know how to do this, but we have to figure it out. There is the challenge. That's before us. I could go through these other things, but the bottom line for my students is, on the left, this will help you get a job. Walk into a company and say, I am the smartest on the block on marketing, and I know how to connect sustainability to it. Hire me, and they will. The right is how to have a long-term career, how to focus on the real target. It is not just selling a sustainable paintbrush. It is not just selling sustainable food. It's actually dealing with human life in the Anthropocene. It's about changing the system. So I just want to go through some things very quickly and then wrap up, because I know we're short of time here. But to begin with, we have to start to think about the system. And I don't want to stress that enough. I do want to stress that too much, actually. The idea that a company can install a set of windmills and say, look, we're a sustainable company, it actually makes no empirical sense. If we start to think about electricity, for example, we have to think about sustainability in the entire system, from generation through transmission, distribution, use, and let's throw in mobility. If we can make the system sustainable, now we're dealing with life in the Anthropocene. Now we're dealing with the root of the problem and finding the real solutions. And so you focusing on buildings, moving into cities, moving into infrastructure, that's the direction to go. One building plunked in the middle of Grand Rapids does not make sustainability, but a sustainable Grand Rapids does. And that's the shift in thinking that has to take place here, which requires some different thinking on numerous dimensions. We have to think differently about operations, how we think about how we do what we do. We have to think differently about organizations, how we interact with customers, how we set up our organizations. Right now in business schools, we teach the shareholder model, but there are many other ways to organize a company. And we have to think differently about metrics and models. And I just want to pause here before wrapping up. There are numerous aspects of business at present that are problematic for thinking about sustainability. For example, GDP. GDP is really a problematic metric for getting us towards sustainability, because GDP can go up for all the wrong reasons. I can actually, if I chose to, I don't think my fiance would let me, but I could start every day now at Krispy Kreme donuts and start my day eating donuts, and GDP will go up. And then I'll have a heart attack, and GDP will go up because I'll go to the hospital. And then I will die, and they will pay for a funeral, and GDP will go up. Now, certainly, some of those activities are desirable, and some of them are not. But GDP does not know how to differentiate. GDP is a very blunt and crude metric of any movement of money. I can make a company. I can dump all my pollution into a river. GDP goes up because I've saved money. I've increased profits. Now we have to go back and clean the river. An engineering firm has to come in and do it. GDP just went up because we're now spending money to clean up that river. GDP is blind on certain areas. If you want a really interesting read, Nicolas Sarkozy, when he was president of France, commissioned Joseph Stiglitz and Amartya Sen, two Nobel laureates in economics, to come up with an alternative or a way to adjust GDP. It's a fascinating read on the ways that GDP gets in trouble, some things it misses, and other metrics we can use to actually measure national economic health in a serious way. I mean, GDP could encourage a country like Madagascar, deforest the country. GDP goes up, you just sold all this wood, and then future generations are left without an opportunity to make money on that wood. GDP gets us into trouble. Another is discount rates. Certainly $1 tomorrow is worth less than $1 today. We know this. So in companies, let's say we use a standard discount rate, maybe something around 5%. Just using a straight line depreciation, that means that everything 20 years and beyond is worthless. Now, when we're talking about climate change, is that true? Everything 20 years and beyond is called your kids' and your grandkids' future. Is that worthless? And Nicholas Stern raised a really healthy debate on this when he analyzed the cost of climate change. He used an outrageously low discount rate. An economist hammered him. He said, look, in certain circumstances, it's actually immoral to use discount rates, and climate change is one of them. So we teach that, and it starts to get us in trouble. I can go through others, but how we think differently about the purpose of the firm. This is in play right now as well. Milton Friedman's ideas that the purpose of the firm is to make money for its shareholder is really being questioned in a very serious way, because there are other models. Peter Drucker came out and said, no, that's not what a business does. A business creates and serves a market, and profits is a measure of how well they do it. But it is not the objective. That needs to come in more thinking, because when you start to have companies that just want to make money, they start cutting corners, they build crappy buildings, they are just going to flip them, and cities lose for it. So this is what I'm focusing on with the idea of market transformation. This is where we're going to start to think differently, and companies are grasping this. Toyota has announced that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, both in the use and the manufacture of their products. How are they going to do it? They have no effing idea. How are they going to do it? They're going to connect the system around them. They're going to bring in suppliers, buyers, governments, strange partnerships, other kinds of companies to get this done. So let me close, because I just got the hook, with a thought to really drive this point home of where are we going and how are we going to get there. And I want to use my grandmother to do this. This is my grandmother. She was born in 1899. She was died in 1995. And when she died, I really thought, wow, what she saw in her lifetime. She saw the advent of indoor electrification. She saw the advent of indoor plumbing. She saw the first automobile. She saw the first flight. She saw the first jet engine. She saw man land on the moon. She saw the first computer. She saw all that and more in one lifetime. A child born today will live into the 22nd century. What will that world look like? It will look as different to them as the world that my grandmother saw change before her eyes. And we can't even imagine it. If I had told my grandmother the world she would die in, she would have said, you're nuts. That's crazy. That's not going to happen. If I could possibly show my students the world they would die in, they would say the same thing. But it's fun to speculate. What will be different? The way this building will be powered will be different. Our energy systems will be totally different. Cars, they could very well, and I would bet money they will be gone, at least in their present form. My car sitting out there, maybe it's going to be autonomous vehicles. If we think about autonomous vehicles, we start to think differently about cities. If we have autonomous vehicles, I call up a car when I need it, takes me where I need to go. That means we only need enough cars for peak demand. Right now, and at any point in time, over 95% of the auto fleet is sitting idle, is doing nothing. They're gone. With them goes parking garages. With them goes many streets. With them goes the garage in the back of your house. With them goes gas stations and mechanic shops. Our entire landscape changes in ways that are very hard to imagine what will fill them. There's where you guys come in. You guys are thinking systemically about buildings, about the built infrastructure. Take it on as a fun thought experiment. What will a world look like with autonomy in vehicles? And what will Grand Rapids look like with less roads? Will it become a walkable city? Will, for the first time, cities be designed for actually human beings? Because right now, you know this, they're designed for automobiles. What will that world look like? Because the most important thing is not just imagining what that world will look like, but then deciding what role you want to play and making it the world you want to be. So closing with a quote from Abraham Lincoln, the best way to predict your future is to create it. Thank you very much.